It all began on a rainy Thursday evening. The kind of evening that makes the world feel smaller, quieter, almost like time is standing still. People hurried by with umbrellas, boots splashing through shallow puddles. But one girl. She didn't walk past. She stopped. And that's where everything changed. Her name was Lila. Kind, gentle. The sort of girl who saw people, not just their clothes, or their smiles, but their soul. She was walking home from the library, carrying a bag of used books she had picked up for the local shelter. Then she saw him. A man, sitting by the bus stop. Soaked through. Head bowed. As if the world had forgotten him. No sign. No cup. Just a crumpled coat and a silent look of defeat. Lila paused. People passed by, some looked, some didn't. But she saw something in his eyes. A question. A quiet cry. A tiredness not just of body, but of the heart. And without thinking too much, without waiting for anyone's approval, she walked over. She didn't ask for his name. She didn't ask what happened. She simply offered her umbrella, and said softly, "Come with me." That single moment. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was everything. Because what Lila didn't know, what no one knew, was that this man wasn't just a man. He was Gabriel Holt. The billionaire CEO of one of the world's most discreet tech empires. Disappeared from public view 6 months ago. No one knew where he went. Rumors spread. Burnout. A mental breakdown. A retreat into the mountains. But the truth was far quieter. Gabriel had walked away. From the boardrooms. From the money. From the constant noise of people who saw his title, but never him. He wanted to know. If the world could love a man, without the millions. Without the spotlight. He wanted to be seen. And on that rainy night, someone did. Lila didn't bring him to a mansion. She didn't have one. She lived in a modest flat on the 3rd floor. With soft lighting, thrift store furniture, and the scent of cinnamon in the air. It wasn't wealth that filled the space. It was warmth. She made him tea. Gave him a clean towel. Offered the couch without question. And when he tried to explain, stumbling through words, unsure of how to talk about his situation, she just smiled and said, "It's okay. You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad you're here." That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. Not because of discomfort, but because of wonder. He lay on that simple couch, looking at the ceiling, listening to the gentle hum of the old refrigerator, and felt peace for the first time in years. The next day, Lila made breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Some old jam she had canned last summer. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't ask him to leave. She just made space for him to be. And in that silence, something grew. Trust. Hope. Maybe even the first sparks of something deeper. Gabriel began helping around her neighborhood. Fixing small things. Carrying groceries for older neighbors. Mowing overgrown lawns without being asked. People began to notice him. But not as a stranger. As someone kind. And day by day, he was healing. Not through therapy, not through riches, but through kindness freely given. Lila still didn't know who he was. Not really. She only saw the man before her. Not the billions behind him. Not the companies. Not the legacy. Just Gabriel. And that's what made it real. You see, sometimes, the greatest riches are not in what we keep, but in who we become. And the people who see us when we have nothing. They're the ones worth giving everything to. Time moved gently in Lila's world. No rushing. No pressure. Just a quiet rhythm of simplicity and sincere care. Gabriel, still wearing the clothes she had washed and folded, began to find comfort in the small things. The smell of brewing coffee in the morning. The creak of her wooden floorboards. The way sunlight filtered through her yellow curtains. He wasn't a CEO here. He wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man. Learning how to feel again. One chilly morning, as Lila wrapped his scarf around his neck before he went to help a neighbor, Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't love yet. But it was close. It was something deeper than admiration. He had seen boardroom loyalty. He had seen ambition, charm, competition. But Lila was different. She gave without expectation. She smiled without motive. And she made every room feel like home. Back at her small job in the town library, Lila returned each evening with little pay, but endless stories. She would talk about the kids who borrowed too many books. The old man who always forgot his library card. The shy teenager slowly learning to read. And Gabriel would listen. Not just with his ears. But with his heart. One night, after dinner, it started to rain again. The same soft drizzle as the day they met. Lila stood by the window. Holding her mug. Watching the water trace paths down the glass. And Gabriel, from behind, whispered a thought only in his heart. This is the life I never knew I needed. The next day, something strange happened. A sleek black car parked quietly across the street. Two men in suits stepped out. Eyes scanning the building. Gabriel froze. They had found him. He had vanished 6 months ago, leaving only a handwritten letter to his board. No explanation. No location. Just a decision. And now, the world wanted him back. But, did he want them? Lila noticed the tension in his eyes. But said nothing. She only offered him a blanket that night. And left a slice of banana bread by his pillow. No questions. Just care. That night, Gabriel didn't sleep. He stood on her tiny balcony, watching the stars. And asked himself the question that echoed louder than any boardroom debate. If they ask me to come back, will I go? Because the truth was, he missed nothing from that old world. Not the quarterly earnings. Not the luxury suits. Not the forced smiles or red carpet handshakes. He missed nothing, except, maybe, the man he used to be before all the money. And with Lila, he had found him again. He began writing a letter. Not to resign. Not to explain. But to tell the truth. To the world. To himself. That success is not measured in stocks or square footage. But in quiet moments. In gentle hands. In hearts that still believe in kindness. The next morning, he handed her the envelope. I need to deliver this, he said softly. But I'll be back. Lila didn't stop him. She just nodded. Because that's what trust looks like. Letting someone go, with the faith that they'll return. At the city's edge, he met with his board. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted. But Gabriel spoke simply. I stepped away to see if I still existed outside the noise. I found someone who saw me, not as a name, but as a person. That's who I want to be from now on. Gasps. Questions. Confusion. But Gabriel didn't need their approval anymore. He had already found what mattered. He returned that evening. Same scarf. Same slow steps. Lila opened the door. Her eyes said everything before a word was spoken. And Gabriel, for the first time in his life, smiled like a man who had everything. Because in her eyes, he did. But the story is far from over. Because what comes next is not about riches. It's about love. And the beauty of a life built not on gold, but on grace. The days that followed felt different. Like the first breeze after winter. Gentle, healing, full of promise. Gabriel was no longer hiding. And yet, he didn't leave. He could have gone back to mansions, private jets, gala invitations. But he stayed. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He began waking up early. Not to check stock reports, but to make Lila tea. He learned her routines. The way she hummed softly when washing dishes. How she tied her hair when she was focused. The way her smile lingered when she read something beautiful. And slowly, day by day, he started to give her little pieces of who he truly was. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big announcements. Just quiet truths. Like how he loved painting, but hadn't touched a brush in years. How he missed his late mother's handwritten letters. And how, in all his wealth, he had never once felt at home, until now. Lila listened. The way only someone who truly sees you can. And she never once treated him differently. Even after he told her the truth. That he was Gabriel Holt. Not just Gabe. Not just a man she found by the bus stop. But the very same Gabriel Holt whose face had once graced business magazines. She didn't gasp. She didn't back away. She just looked at him. Paused. Then said softly, "I liked you better when you were folding laundry." And in that moment, Gabriel laughed. Not the polite, guarded laugh of boardrooms. But real laughter. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and full of relief. Because for the first time, he knew someone loved him. Not despite his secrets, but because of his soul. Word began to spread. Not about them, but about the man who had returned. Gabriel's company was shocked when he declined to retake full control. Instead, he appointed someone new, someone younger, with vision. And turned his attention to smaller things. To forgotten neighborhoods. To rebuilding community libraries. To funding shelters anonymously. And at the heart of it all was Lila. Together, they started something beautiful. A small initiative. No press. No banners. Just a warm building tucked between old shops. Where people could come, rest, read, get warm meals. Or just, be seen. They called it the corner light. Because sometimes, all someone needs is one kind face at the end of a hard day. People still whispered. Why her? Why Lila, a girl from nowhere, with nothing but old books and too much kindness? But Gabriel. He knew the answer. Because while the world had taught him to build empires, Lila taught him how to build a life. The days that followed felt different. Like the first breeze after winter. Gentle, healing, full of promise. Gabriel was no longer hiding. And yet, he didn't leave. He could have gone back to mansions, private jets, gala invitations. But he stayed. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He began waking up early. Not to check stock reports, but to make Lila tea. He learned her routines. The way she hummed softly when washing dishes. How she tied her hair when she was focused. The way her smile lingered when she read something beautiful. And slowly, day by day, he started to give her little pieces of who he truly was. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big announcements. Just quiet truths. Like how he loved painting, but hadn't touched a brush in years. How he missed his late mother's handwritten letters. And how, in all his wealth, he had never once felt at home, until now. Lila listened. The way only someone who truly sees you can. And she never once treated him differently. Even after he told her the truth. That he was Gabriel Holt. Not just Gabe. Not just a man she found by the bus stop. But the very same Gabriel Holt whose face had once graced business magazines. She didn't gasp. She didn't back away. She just looked at him. Paused. Then said softly. I liked you better when you were folding laundry. And in that moment, Gabriel laughed. Not the polite, guarded laugh of boardrooms. But real laughter. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and full of relief. Because for the first time, he knew someone loved him. Not despite his secrets. But because of his soul. Word began to spread. Not about them. But about the man who had returned. Gabriel's company was shocked when he declined to retake full control. Instead, he appointed someone new, someone younger, with vision. And turned his attention to smaller things. To forgotten neighborhoods. To rebuilding community libraries. To funding shelters anonymously. And at the heart of it all was Lila. Together, they started something beautiful. A small initiative. No press. No banners. Just a warm building tucked between old shops. Where people could come, rest, read, get warm meals. Or just, be seen. They called it the corner light. Because sometimes, all someone needs is one kind face at the end of a hard day. People still whispered. Why her? Why Lila, a girl from nowhere, with nothing but old books and too much kindness? But Gabriel. He knew the answer. Because while the world had taught him to build empires, Lila taught him how to build a life. They planted a garden behind the center. Nothing fancy. Just wildflowers. Tomatoes. Lavender. Lila loved lavender. And every time it bloomed, Gabriel would smile. Because it reminded him of the scent in her kitchen. And the peace he found the night she let him in. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned amber, Lila stood with soil on her fingers, laughter in her eyes. Gabriel looked at her. And in that moment, he knew. She hadn't just changed his life. She had saved it. Not with grand gestures. But with gentle love. With mercy. With patience. With the belief that even the most forgotten souls are worthy of care. And so, standing there in that garden, he made a silent vow. She gave me a second chance. I will spend the rest of my days giving her 1,000. But the journey wasn't over. In fact, the next chapter was just beginning. Because love isn't a destination. It's a road. And on that road, the most beautiful stories are built. Not with diamonds or declarations. But with trust. And time. And two hearts willing to walk together. Seasons changed. Summer melted into fall. And the world around them turned golden. The leaves whispered through the streets like forgotten poems. And every sunset felt like a painting they watched together. Hand in hand. Quietly grateful. Their life wasn't glamorous. But it was good. Simple dinners. Shared books. Long walks through the market where Lila picked out spices she couldn't pronounce. And Gabriel pretended he could cook, just to see her laugh. But life, even the sweetest kind, has its shadows. And one of them was about to return. One morning, Lila received a letter. Her landlord had sold the building. The flat would be demolished by winter. Everyone had to leave. Gabriel saw her reading the paper. How her shoulders dropped. How the sparkle left her eyes, just for a moment. She folded the letter and quietly placed it in a drawer. No drama. No panic. Just a deep sigh. The kind you take when you're used to losing things you love. She didn't tell Gabriel right away. She didn't want to burden him. Even now. Even after knowing who he really was. She still believed she had to earn space in his world. She had spent so long taking care of others. She forgot it was okay to be taken care of too. Gabriel noticed her distance. The way she stared off into space. The quiet moments when she looked around her apartment. As if memorizing it. And one evening, when he found her gently packing her books into a box. He didn't ask questions. He simply wrapped his arms around her and said, "You're not going through this alone." And that was it. The moment that changed everything. Because until then, their love had grown in borrowed time. Shared spaces. Unspoken hopes. But now. It was time to build something together. They searched for weeks. Not mansions. Not anything flashy. Just a place with a big window. A little garden. And enough room for her books, and his paints. Eventually, they found it. A quiet cottage on the edge of town. Worn bricks. Crooked steps. A chimney that leaned a little too far left. But Lila loved it instantly. "It feels like it's been waiting for us," she whispered. And Gabriel smiled. Because so had he. They moved in with no fanfare. No press. Just 2 mugs. A battered couch. And a promise to start fresh. Together. Gabriel returned to painting. Lila arranged her books by color, not author. Because it just looked happier that way. And on their first night. They danced slowly in the empty living room. No music. Just the sound of rain on the roof. And the rhythm of 2 hearts, finally home. Soon, people from town began visiting. Not to see the billionaire. But to ask Lila for her jam recipes. To see if Gabriel could help repaint the school fence. To sit in the little garden, where kindness bloomed more freely than flowers. They weren't a mystery anymore. They were part of the story now. One evening, as they watched the stars from their porch, Lila turned to him. "What made you stay?" she asked. Gabriel thought for a moment. Then looked into her eyes and said, "Because you never once asked me for more. You only gave." And in that silence, a truth settled between them. It wasn't wealth, or beauty, or even time that builds love. It's presence. It's consistency. It's showing up, again and again. Even when life is messy. Even when hearts have scars. Lila had loved the man when he had nothing. And Gabriel had loved the girl who gave everything. Together. They had built something richer than empires. A life. A home. A love story whispered in small moments. But echoed in eternity. And yet. Fate still had one more surprise. One final thread. Waiting to be pulled. A twist neither of them saw coming. And when it came. It would test everything. It was a quiet afternoon in late autumn. The wind danced lazily through the trees. And golden leaves floated like memories down the garden path. Lila sat on the porch, wrapped in her old cardigan. A cup of spiced tea in her hands. Her eyes soft, distant. Gabriel watched her from inside. His brush paused mid-stroke on the canvas. He knew that look. She was thinking again. And this time, it wasn't about the weather. Or a new recipe. Or which flower to plant in spring. It was something deeper. Later that evening, as the stars blinked awake across the sky. She told him. "I got a letter," she said quietly, placing it in his hands. Gabriel unfolded it slowly, recognizing the seal immediately. It was from a medical clinic just outside the city. His heart tightened, but he said nothing. He read words like abnormal scan, tests recommended, possible early signs. The rest blurred. Not because he didn't understand, but because he understood too well. Lila's voice was calm. "It's probably nothing," she said with a smile. "The doctor just wants to be sure." But Gabriel knew. He had spent his life reading people. Investors, competitors, advisors. But no one taught him how to read fear in the eyes of the one you love most. Still, he nodded, held her hand, and whispered, "We'll go together." The days that followed were quiet. The kind of quiet filled with gentle pretending. Lila kept baking. Gabriel kept painting. But in every smile was a pause. In every laugh, a tremble just beneath the surface. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and soft hope. White walls, plastic chairs, magazines no one read. Gabriel stayed close, never once letting go of her hand. When the doctor entered, time slowed. But the words that followed were not what they feared. Not yet. The scan had shown something. Small. Unclear. But early. They had caught it early. A procedure. Some monitoring. A change in diet. It wasn't a full storm. But the clouds had gathered. As they drove home, Lila stared out the window. "I'm fine," she whispered. "I feel fine." Gabriel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and gently placed her hand over his heart. "Then I'm fine too," he said. It was in moments like these, the quiet trials, that real love either deepens or fades. But theirs, it deepened. Like roots growing stronger in wind. Like flame made brighter in the cold. Gabriel began reading up on health and nutrition. He started cooking, terribly at first. But with so much love, Lila couldn't help but laugh. She taught him how to make ginger tea the right way. He taught her how to slow down and let someone else carry the weight. Their days took on a softer rhythm. Less rushing. More resting. And yet, somehow, it was more alive than ever before. At night, they lay side by side, listening to the wind, to the crickets, to the silence. And in that silence, they found strength. Because real love isn't loud. It's not made of fireworks or fancy gifts. It's made in moments like these. When two hearts hold each other through the unknown. Weeks passed. The follow-up tests came. The news? Good. The threat had not grown. The worst had not come. And for the first time in what felt like years, Lila exhaled fully. So did Gabriel. Not because the danger was entirely gone, but because they had faced it together. And they had chosen not fear, but faith. That winter, they celebrated quietly. Just the two of them. A small tree in the corner. Candles on the windowsill. And a dinner made with shaky hands and shared laughter. They exchanged no expensive gifts. Just handwritten letters. Gabriel said, "You once gave me shelter from the rain. Now, I'll spend the rest of my life sheltering your heart." Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, two hearts, once strangers, beat now as one. But even now, something else stirred. Something beautiful was coming. A door was about to open. And neither of them saw it yet. Spring arrived quietly. The snow melted, leaving behind soft earth and the scent of new beginnings. The little garden behind the cottage. Once bare and frozen. Now stretched awake with blooming lavender and tiny green shoots. And in the middle of it, Lila knelt in her overalls, hands in the dirt, smile on her face. Gabriel watched her from the porch. Coffee in hand. Heart full. They had made it through the shadows. Not untouched. But together. And that made all the difference. One morning, while sorting through old mail, Gabriel found something curious. An envelope, aged, unopened. Addressed to him, from months ago. It had been forwarded from his corporate office. Forgotten in the shuffle of his disappearance. He opened it casually, expecting some legal update. But what he read, made him freeze. It was from a publisher. A small press in the countryside. They had received a draft submission. One Lila had written and quietly mailed months ago. When she thought he was sleeping. It wasn't about him. Not directly. It was about kindness. About how love can live in little things. About how one small act can rewrite the entire story of a life. They loved it. And they wanted to publish it. With her name. Her voice. Her heart. Gabriel didn't say anything right away. He slipped the letter into his coat pocket. Carried it with him for days. Waiting for the right moment. And then, one evening, just as the sun spilled golden light across their little home, he invited her to sit in the garden. No occasion. Just, a feeling. He handed her the letter without a word. Lila blinked. Read the first few lines. And then. Her hands began to tremble. She looked up, eyes wide. Tears clinging to her lashes. You weren't supposed to see this, she whispered. Gabriel smiled. But I did. And so did they. Lila had never imagined her words meant anything. She wrote because it helped her breathe. Because it helped her understand the world. But now. Someone wanted to share that world. To give her a voice. On paper. In people's hands. A few weeks later, her story was accepted officially. She signed the contract on their kitchen table. Next to a vase of fresh daffodils. Gabriel watched as she wrote her name. Firmly, proudly. He had seen billion-dollar mergers. International deals. But none of it ever moved him like this. Like watching her believe in herself. The publisher invited her to a small reading event. Just local authors. Readers. And a bookstore tucked between two bakeries. Lila was nervous. She had never stood in front of a crowd. But Gabriel, ever steady, said the words that steadied her. They're not strangers. They're people who came to hear your heart. That evening, she wore a simple blue dress. The same one she wore the day they moved into the cottage. Gabriel held her hand all the way there. He didn't let go until she stood at the little podium. Then he stepped back. And watched her shine. Her voice was soft, but clear. Her story, humble, but powerful. People listened. Some smiled. Some wept. Because they heard not just a tale. But truth. And Gabriel? He saw something even more beautiful. He saw the girl who once saved him from the cold. Now lighting up the lives of others. Afterward, people lined up to meet her. To say thank you. To share their own stories. And through it all, Lila kept looking toward the corner. Where Gabriel stood. Because no matter how full the room was, his eyes were still the home she knew best. That night, they walked back slowly. Hand in hand. And under the moonlight, Lila whispered. Do you ever think, maybe this was all meant to happen? Gabriel stopped. He looked at her. And then, with that quiet certainty only love can bring, he said. No. I know it was. Because sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin in the most ordinary moments. A rainy night. A kind gesture. A quiet girl who simply chose to care. And through her care, changed everything. But the story isn't over. Because love, real love, keeps unfolding. One gentle surprise. One sacred season. At a time. Summer returned like a warm memory. Gentle breezes, golden skies. And laughter echoing through the garden behind the cottage. By now, the lavender had bloomed in wild waves. And the tomatoes were ripening under the sun. Life was simple. And life was full. Lila's book had quietly made its way into the world. Passed from hand to hand. Dog-eared and loved. Letters began arriving. From women in shelters. From tired fathers. From strangers who felt seen for the first time. Her words were healing people. And Gabriel? He watched it all unfold like the most beautiful miracle. Not one he built. But one he belonged to. One soft evening, after the world had settled into dusk. Gabriel lit the little fire pit they kept near the garden. Lila came outside with 2 cups of tea. Her favorite worn sweater draped around her shoulders. They sat without words. No need for them anymore. Silence, between people who truly love, is just another kind of music. Then Gabriel stood up. Reached into his pocket. And slowly knelt before her. No crowd. No cameras. Just stars overhead. And the lavender brushing softly in the breeze. He held out a ring, simple, vintage, with a tiny sapphire. Not because of its price. But because it matched the color of the sky the day she saved him. Lila didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just looked at him. Eyes full of knowing. And whispered the only word that mattered. Yes. They married quietly. A morning ceremony under the big oak near the bookstore. Local friends brought food. Children from the shelter tied flowers to the chairs. There was no grand orchestra. Just a young girl playing violin and the sound of birds in the trees. Lila wore a soft white dress, made by the woman who ran the fabric shop. Gabriel wore a suit he hadn't touched in years, but this time, it felt like him. They exchanged vows handwritten on torn notebook pages. Full of little jokes and promises wrapped in poetry. And when they kissed, it wasn't just the beginning of a marriage. It was the homecoming of 2 wandering hearts. In the months that followed, their life remained beautifully ordinary. They adopted an old golden retriever from the shelter. Named her Maple, because her fur looked like syrup. They started teaching writing workshops at the community center. Gabriel even began painting again. His art now filled with warmth and life. Inspired by quiet moments and quiet love. One afternoon, a young man came by the center. He had been living in his car. He didn't ask for help. Just food. Lila looked at Gabriel. And Gabriel looked at the young man. Then he stood up. Walked over. And handed him a clean blanket. He smiled and said gently, "Come with me." And in that moment, it all came full circle. The story that began with kindness now continued through it. Not just between them, but through everyone they touched. Because the greatest love stories aren't just about romance. They're about restoration. About choosing mercy when the world says move on. About seeing the person behind the pain and loving them there. Lila and Gabriel didn't just fall in love. They rose in it. Grew in it. Gave it away freely, like bread to the hungry, like warmth to the cold. And in doing so, they built a life not of luxury, but of legacy. So if you ever wonder if small kindness matters, if quiet hearts can change the world, remember this. It wasn't money that saved Gabriel. It wasn't status that gave Lila joy. It was one rainy night. One open door. One cup of tea. And a heart brave enough to care. The moral? Kindness isn't weakness. It's power. Gentle, but world-changing. And the ones who give it, even when they have little, are the ones who carry the greatest light. And so, their story ends not in a castle, but in a cottage. Not with a crown, but with connection. Because true love isn't found. It's chosen. Every day. Over and over again. Please like and subscribe to our channel, click the subscribe button and subscribe, more story coming up. Thanks for watching.